So,
great to see you, Alex.
Dr. Stein, we have a special counsel Mueller's indictment which says that Russians used social media to boost your campaign as well as Senator Sanders' campaign in an effort to damage Hillary Clinton and then help Donald Trump. So your reaction to Senator Sanders there? Look, he's saying that his campaign had at least an idea there was some level of interference. Were you ever alerted to any of these efforts by Russia to boost your campaign?
So let me just back up for a minute to point out that what was cited in the Mueller indictment was one Facebook posting, okay, one Facebook posting, and that's it. That is being claimed as evidence of our campaign benefiting from a boost from Russia. Remember, one Facebook post, and in other evidence cited outside of Mueller's indictment, we were found to have received one or possibly two Facebook ads posted by the so-called Internet Research Agency. So remember here, on Facebook, there are trillions of pieces of information posted. So this doesn't pass the laugh test, actually,
well, but
as
it doesn't,
evidence
but
of our campaign benefiting.
So were you aware, though, of these incidents you're talking about, of the Facebook post and of the agency's advertisement? Had you been aware of those?
It's pretty hard to pick up one ad or one Facebook post among trillions.
No,
so,
understandably so. So you were not aware?
Weren't.
You were not aware?
No, we were not aware. But let me say, we were aware of other kinds of interference. For example, we know that $6 billion in free airtime was given to Donald Trump by the big networks. $6 billion. This was twice as much as Hillary Clinton, about 4 times as much as Bernie Sanders, way more than the independent candidates. Is that not interference?
No, listen,
to have billions
I do understand, but it's not Russian interference, and I will say, I'm proud to say that we actually had you on our broadcast several times. I had you on in person when we were there covering the Democratic National Convention. I understand, but that unfortunately isn't going to be the topic of this particular interview.
What the CEO of CBS said was that for Donald Trump, he was damn good. That was the word he was damn good for the networks, even though he was not good for America. The point I'm making here, Alex, is that we don't want to miss the forest here through the tree. Yes, there was Russian interference, but remember, there was very compelling interference going on by way of media, by way of the DNC. Right. Did the DNC not rig the primary?
Well, look, I understand all of that. I do completely take your point, but it's not the point that we're going to have here. In terms of the indictment with Robert Mueller, that indictment came out and your name was mentioned in there. I do want to play a soundbite that you may have heard earlier. It was from our blast block. It's John Podesta, of course, from the Clinton campaign, and here's what he said today. Take a listen to this.
They were pushing votes, just to give one example, to Jill Stein. Her vote in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin was greater than the gap between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton in those states. So you can't prove that it did affect the outcome, but it certainly seems likely that it had some impact.
So, while we may never know precisely whether these efforts played a role in the outcome of the election, when we look at 3 of the states that Russia targeted, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania being among those that they targeted, Pennsylvania as well, if I didn't say that, is it plausible that these Russian actors created enough influence that changed a few thousand votes here and there, and ultimately that could have altered the election?
So let me say the assumption here is that the votes belong to Hillary Clinton and that that my votes were stolen from someone else. And I think that's an insult to American voters who really deserve to choose, who made it perfectly clear that they did not like. In fact, these were the most distrusted and disliked candidates in recorded history. So to try to excuse my votes as being stolen from Hillary is outrageous. But beyond that, we have data. We actually have scientific data on how people voted. And what we know is that the people who voted for me, in vast majority, over 60%, would not have voted if I wasn't there. And of the remainder who would vote, many of them would have gone to Donald Trump. So just asserting that those votes belong to Hillary is just another sign of the arrogance of the Democratic establishment, which is really working overtime here to silence its opposition. And if you look at the smear campaign that's actually been conducted against me about being a Russian tool, when did that get started? Remember, my trip based on foreign policy, on a peace offensive, on addressing nuclear weapons and the climate crisis.
You were speaking against the war, yep, while you were there.
Absolutely, and trying to promote nuclear disarmament and really substantive climate emergency action, talking not only to Russian media and officials, but on that same trip I spoke to the deputy lead negotiator for China at the climate talks. I spoke with Jeremy Corbyn, the head of the Labour Party in the UK. So these are really critical issues, and I'd say what's wrong with our elected officials that this is not on their agenda.
Very important issues. We've discussed them before on this broadcast, but do you think,
to your
Doctor,
credit, absolutely,
that by being there, perhaps did your presence there maybe, you know, uptick their concept of interfering using you?
Well, in fact, my presence there was not covered here in the United States whatsoever. So it wasn't until it became a scam, basically, a smear campaign against me. And it speaks volumes about when did that happen, because we were public. There were no backroom meetings going on here. This was all being announced in my press releases, on our website, in our emails.
But they became aware of you.
There was no secrets.
They saw that you had a very
cared.
active campaign. They were like, Dr. Jill Stein, this is another presidential candidate.
Well, they did not, put it this way, they did not assist me in any way. So that's all well and good. You know, there's an effort being made here to try to denigrate political resistance and the opposition which is growing. And fundamentally, that's what's going on here, is that you have two political parties that are scared stiff of their opposition because they saw a revolt, both of them. And, people who were voting for Trump were not for Trump. We have polls that show that as well. They were fundamentally voting against their experience of the past 8 years, against the neoliberal policies that have offshored our jobs, that have basically undermined our wages, and which have really caused a crisis, a generation that's mired in debt right now, of young people who can't get out of college debt. So there's a revolt going on, and the smear campaign was launched against me not when I went on my European trip, not whatsoever. It was the week that I received the nomination. Then all of a sudden this smear campaign was launched with all of the coordination that we're accusing Russia of. You know, it goes on here as well. Look, Hillary Clinton also has her troll army to the tune of $6 million a year, in fact, is their budget. Look, so it's going on both sides of the fence here.
That does not necessarily reflect an outside, a foreign entity coming and influencing this troll army you're referencing. But my final question to you is, do you concede anything, even a single vote, that maybe have come in your favor as a result of Russian influence? I think the question is here, really, are the Americans in revolt? And there's no doubt that Americans are in revolt. Remember, 75% of Americans were screaming for open debates because they didn't like what they were given. So for the Democrats here to be leading the charge, to say, oh, this was just the Russians, it's like they're saying that Black Lives Matter is Russian influence. Or back at the time of the Civil Rights Movement, that was being denigrated as just a communist ploy. So this is, unfortunately, what an insecure power structure does in order to try to silence us. And it's very important that we stand up and not allow this to be a pretext for censorship, because that's where it's going, and it's already impacted progressive voices.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.